People often say that a person's eyes never lie. But 65-year-old Meher Aunty had learned the rare art of teaching even her eyes to stay quiet. To the world, she was the same gentle woman who offered warm chai, who tucked her sari neatly, who smiled with that polite softness only age can sculpt. People adored her. Children waved. Neighbors said she was strong, calm, a blessing to the lane. But no one knew that every smile she offered came with a weight she carried beneath her ribs. A weight she never dared to name. Every morning at 6:45 a.m., like clockwork, she sat by her window. The sunlight touched her shoulder lightly, almost asking permission to enter. Birds chirped. Fruit sellers shouted their usual prices. Life outside bloomed effortlessly. Inside her, however, time felt frozen. She held a small wooden drawer in her lap, old, faded, with a crack in the corner. Her fingers brushed its surface the way one touches something sacred. When she opened it, inside lay a single pair of reading glasses. Not hers. She didn't put them on. She just touched them, closed the drawer, and placed it back on the table. Every day. Without fail. People thought it was a harmless habit. But only she knew what those glasses meant. And what memory clung to them like dust that refuses to wipe away. At 7:10 a.m., she stood up, walked to the kitchen, and made 1 cup of tea. Just one. Even though, for 38 years, she had made 2. She stirred the tea gently, letting the steam touch her face. The silence in the house pressed on her, not loudly, but insistently, like someone gently tapping on a closed door. Sometimes she felt the urge to speak to the silence, as if it were a person sitting across from her. As if the emptiness had grown a shape, a presence. But she swallowed those thoughts. People her age knew how to bury feelings gracefully. Yet that morning felt different. There was a strange stillness in the air, a heaviness that wasn't there before. When she placed the teacup on the table, she noticed something odd. The door of the quiet room, slightly ajar. Her breath caught. That door had been locked for 3 years. By her own hands. Her heart thudded softly, like a timid knock from inside her chest. No wind could have opened it. No mistake. No accident. Someone or something had moved it. And for the first time in years, the silence around her did not feel empty. Felt expectant. Waiting. Watching. Pulling. She stood frozen, the steam from her tea fading into the air. Her fingers trembled ever so slightly. Whatever lived behind that door was ready to be remembered. There is a kind of morning that doesn't arrive with sunlight, but with a feeling. And on that day, Meher Aunty felt it before she even opened her eyes. A strange weight in the air, like the world had paused just long enough for her to notice. She sat up slowly, listening. Her home was usually predictable. The hum of the ceiling fan, the distant call of the vegetable seller, the rustle of leaves outside her balcony. But today there was a stillness so deep, it felt as if the air itself had stopped breathing. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and stepped out of bed. As always, she walked toward the window at 6:45 a.m. Habit is a strong anchor, especially for those who live alone. Her fingers parted the curtain gently. The world outside looked the same. Children running, milkman ringing his bell, the morning breeze carrying the fragrance of wet soil. Yet something inside her whispered that the day was not ordinary. Her gaze drifted toward the long corridor. At the very end was the quiet room. She had locked it herself the day her husband left the world. 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days ago. But she never counted. At least that's what she told people. That door had stayed closed ever since. Like a memory you refuse to touch because you're afraid it might still be warm. But today, the door was not fully shut. A thin line of light spilled into the corridor, delicate and golden. Her heartbeat stumbled. She took a slow step toward it, then stopped, afraid that the moment she walked closer, the truth behind the half-open door would break her carefully maintained quiet. She tried distracting herself with routine. Kitchen. 1 cup. Just one. She reached for the jar of tea leaves, but her fingers brushed something on the counter, an old book she had not touched in months. It wasn't there last night. Her breath hitched as she opened it. From inside, a letter slipped out. Yellow, soft at the edges. Her husband's handwriting. Her hands trembled, but she didn't open it. Not yet. Some doors in life open slowly, like they know your heart can only take so much. A soft thud echoed from the corridor. Her head snapped up. A chill ran through her. The sound came from the quiet room. It wasn't loud. Just a small, gentle sound, like paper falling or a photograph sliding off a shelf. But in a house where no one else lived, even the softest sound felt like a message. She clutched the unread letter to her chest. For the first time in 3 years, she spoke into the silence. Is someone there? No answer. Only the echo of her own voice fading into the hallway. But the room seemed to wait. Not threatening. Not frightening. Just waiting. As if it knew she had finally noticed. And deep inside her, she felt that something long forgotten was finally waking up. There are rooms in every home that hold more than just objects. Some hold stories. Some hold ghosts. And some, like Meher Auntie's quiet room, hold the kind of silence that hurts to breathe in. She stood in the corridor, her fingers curled around the unread letter, her eyes fixed on the half-open door. A door she had locked. And a part of her heart she had locked with it. For a long moment she simply stared. The air felt different in the corridor. Thicker, as if memories had gathered there overnight, waiting for her to finally arrive. She pushed the door a little wider with trembling fingertips. A small creak escaped, the kind of sound that makes old memories stir in their sleep. Her husband's study greeted her with the faint smell of paper and sandalwood. Everything was exactly where she had left it 3 years ago. The books arranged neatly, the globe he loved spinning, the yellow lamp, and the half-written notes on the desk. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. Dust sat gently on the table like a thin blanket of forgotten days. But the strangest thing was this. A single photograph lay face down on the floor near the bookshelf. That must have been the sound she heard. But how did it fall? She stooped slowly, knees stiff with age, and picked up the picture frame. Before turning it over, she whispered, almost to herself, "I'm not ready." Her heart trembled like a fragile leaf. She placed the frame on the desk without looking at the photo. The quiet room held a stillness that was too familiar, almost intimate. It felt alive with memories. Their conversations, their little arguments, the way he used to laugh when she corrected his spelling. And yet, there was something else here. Something she couldn't name. The letter in her hand crinkled slightly as she tightened her grip. She took in a deep breath and stepped fully into the room. Her eyes moved across the shelves, noticing things she had forgotten. The ruin of an old bookmark, a jar of pens, her husband's favorite mug with a chipped handle. Then she noticed something new. Something that should not exist. The notebook on his desk, a brown leather-bound journal, was open, wide open. She had left it closed. She was sure of it. Her heartbeat echoed against the walls of her chest. With slow steps, she approached the desk and touched the edge of the notebook. The page fluttered slightly, as if it had been disturbed only moments ago. Her husband's handwriting filled the open page. Some lines crossed out, some incomplete. And at the very bottom of the page, in faint ink, were words that made her breath catch. "If she ever reads this, tell her I'm sorry." The letter in her hand suddenly felt heavier, as if both messages were connected, as if something her husband never got to say was finally finding its way back to her. The room wasn't just quiet. It was calling her, begging her, inviting her to uncover what she had spent years avoiding. And somewhere deep inside, a part of her whispered the truth she had long denied. It was time. Memories are strange things. They don't knock before entering. They don't ask if you're ready. They simply rise, like old dust dancing in a beam of sunlight. Quiet, sudden, inescapable. As Meher Auntie stood before the open notebook, the words, "Tell her I'm sorry," glowed in her mind like an echo from another lifetime. Her fingers trembled. Her breath turned uneven. And without warning, A memory she had buried deep began to unfold. It was a rainy evening. 3 years ago, just weeks before her husband passed away. They were sitting in this very room. He at his desk, she near the window, stitching the loose button on his shirt. The monsoon winds rattled the glass, and a faint lamp glow made everything feel softer, warmer. He had looked at her then, with tired eyes she failed to understand. She remembered that look. She remembered ignoring it. "Meher," he had said quietly. "Sit with me for a while." But she was irritated that day. The milk had boiled over, the neighbor had complained about water leakage, and her knees were hurting more than usual. "Later," she had snapped. "Let me finish this first." He didn't argue. He never argued. But something in his silence that day had felt different. Almost like goodbye. And then came the moment she regretted most. The memory she never spoke of. She remembered turning toward him sharply and saying, "You always want attention like a child. Let me breathe, nah." The hurt on his face had been so gentle, so quiet, that she didn't even notice it until much later. That night he slept early. The next morning he left for his morning walk. And never came back. A heart attack, the doctor said. Instant. Painless. But no one spoke of the conversation from the night before. The way she dismissed him, the words she threw, the moment she pushed away the person she loved most. That memory had followed her like a shadow. She carried it in her chest like a stone. She never told her son. She never told her friends. She never told anyone. But the quiet room knew. The glasses in the drawer knew. Her heart knew. And now, the notebook knew too. She sat down gently on his old chair, her knees creaking, her breath shaking. For the first time in 3 years, she whispered aloud the words she had been too ashamed to say. "I'm sorry. I didn't know it was our last night. I didn't know those were your last words to me." Her voice cracked like old paper. A single tear fell onto the notebook page, smudging the ink just slightly, as if past and present were finally touching. She closed her eyes tightly, letting the memory wash over her, letting the guilt she had locked away finally breathe. Maybe the letter in her hand held the rest of the truth. The part she wasn't ready for. The part he never got to speak. And as she opened her eyes, one thought rose clearly. This wasn't just a memory returning. This was the beginning of forgiveness. His and perhaps her own. There is a moment, just after a storm, when the air feels heavier. Not because of the rain, but because of everything the rain tried to wash away. Meher Aunty felt that heaviness now. The room around her was still, frozen in time, holding its breath as she sat in her husband's chair with the unread letter in her trembling hands. Her eyes wandered again to the floor, to the photograph she had picked up, and to the small, folded piece of paper lying next to where the frame had fallen. She hadn't noticed the paper earlier. It was tucked beneath the frame, almost hidden, like a secret waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Slowly she reached for it. It was a torn note. A sheet from the same brown leather-bound notebook on the desk. The edges were uneven, as though ripped out hurriedly. The handwriting was unmistakably his. She unfolded it gently. On the top corner a date was written. The day before he passed away. Her breath hitched. The note was short, painfully short. Just a few incomplete lines, as if he wrote it between breaths, between moments, between fears he didn't know how to express. "Meher, if something happens to me, if I don't get to say everything, please read." The sentence ended abruptly. Mid-word, mid-thought, mid-heartbeat. Her chest tightened so deeply it felt like the walls of the room leaned in toward her. She searched the floor again, the desk, the shelves. Anywhere the missing part of the note could have slipped. But it wasn't there. It was as if the rest of the message had vanished from the world. She held the torn note against the light, hoping hidden words might appear through the paper. But only tears blurred her vision. "Why didn't you finish it?" she whispered into the empty room. "What were you trying to tell me?" Her voice cracked, carrying years of quiet ache. She looked at the brown notebook again. pages filled with unfinished thoughts, scattered sentences, ideas he never got to develop. And somewhere among them, one message meant for her. But the notebook raised more questions than answers. Why were the pages arranged oddly? Why were some dates missing? Who took out the missing letter? And why was the notebook open now, after 3 long years of silence? As she flipped through the journal with slow, trembling fingers, something caught her eye. A faint impression on one of the blank pages. Like someone had written something hard enough that the pressure left a shadow on the page beneath. She tilted the page toward the window. The sunlight revealed the impression more clearly. 5 words. Barely visible, but enough to steal the breath from her lungs. It's not your fault, Meher. Her knees weakened. Her heart broke and healed at the same time. The missing letter, the torn page, the open notebook. It was all leading somewhere. Somewhere she had been afraid to go. And just then, a soft breeze slipped through the half-open window, pushing the quiet room's door open just a little more, as if inviting her deeper into the truth. Some visitors arrive unannounced. Some arrive unexpectedly. And some arrive as though the universe sent them with a purpose no one else can understand. The next morning, Meher Aunty sat on the veranda, her mind tangled in last night's discoveries. Torn note. The unfinished message. The faint words pressed into the blank page. Her husband's voice echoed inside her like an unfinished prayer. She wrapped her shawl tighter, breathing in the quiet. Then she heard it. A soft, uncertain knock at the gate. Children in the neighborhood rarely knocked. They usually called her name from the street or simply waved. But this was a timid knock, almost shy. When she opened the gate, a little girl stood there. No older than 11. Thin braids, oversized sweater, and eyes that carried a certain oldness. A knowing, soft sadness too deep for her age. "Namaste, Aunty," the girl whispered. I hope I'm not disturbing you." Meher recognized her. A neighborhood child. Quiet. Often seen sitting alone outside her house, drawing patterns in dust. "No disturbance, Beta," Meher said gently. "Come in." The girl stepped inside, but her eyes weren't on Meher. They drifted toward the corridor, toward the quiet room. An uneasy flutter rose in Meher's chest. The girl sat slowly on the edge of the veranda chair. Her fingers curled tight around a small notebook. I wanted to return this," she said softly. She held out the notebook. Meher froze. It was her husband's old pocket diary. The one she thought she had misplaced years ago. The one he always carried when he went for his morning walks. "How did you?" The girl looked down, as if afraid of her own words. It was near the big banyan tree by the park. "I found it months ago. I didn't know whose it was until..." She hesitated. Her eyes lifted, meeting Meher's with a strange gentleness. "Until last night, he told me." Meher's breath halted. "Who told you, Beta?" The girl swallowed hard. Her small voice trembled. "The uncle in your house." The world tilted. Meher felt the air leave her lungs. She gripped the side of her chair to steady herself. "There is no uncle here," she whispered almost to herself. The girl nodded quickly, frightened by her own confession. I know you live alone. That's what Mummy says. But Auntie, yesterday evening, I saw him. The words echoed inside Meher like a heartbeat. The girl pressed the notebook into Meher's hands. "He said you needed this, that you were finally ready." Her voice softened further. "And he told me to tell you something." Sentence. "I don't know what it means." Meher couldn't breathe. "What sentence, Beta?" The girl's eyes glistened. He said, "Tell her I never left." Silence fell between them. A silence filled with shivers, memories, and something that felt dangerously close to truth. Before Meher could speak, the girl stood abruptly. "I should go. Mummy will scold me." She hurried toward the gate. Meher called after her, voice trembling. "Child, what is your name?" The girl paused, looked back and smiled softly. "Shania." Then she ran off, leaving behind a notebook, a message, and a question that trembled through the walls of Meher's heart. Letters. They're strange little things, aren't they? They look harmless, just a folded piece of paper. But sometimes a letter can hold the kind of truth that breaks a person, or sets them free. And on that cloudy Thursday morning, while the kettle hummed its lonely tune in the kitchen, Mrs. Eleanor found herself staring at the small wooden drawer near her bedside, the one she hadn't opened in almost 15 years. It began with something simple. She was looking for an old handkerchief. But the moment her fingers brushed the drawer's cold handle, a familiar shiver traveled up her spine. "Oh, not today," she whispered to herself. But it was too late. Some doors inside the heart, once touched, even gently, refused to stay closed. She pulled the drawer open. Inside were small forgotten things. A broken brooch, a ribbon from her younger days, a single pearl earring that had lost its partner long ago. And beneath all of that, wrapped in fading brown paper, was a bundle of letters tied with a thin blue thread. But one letter was missing. Her breath caught. The blue thread was slightly loose. The shape of the bundle was uneven. One side sagged like a mouth with a missing tooth. "No, no, no," she murmured, her fingers trembling as she counted them again. For 5, 6. There should have been 7. The 7th letter, the one she feared the most, was gone. A dizziness washed over her. She sat on the edge of the bed, her heart beating the way it used to beat when she'd run from the village library to her home as a girl, clutching a book of secrets to her chest. Who took it? Her voice was barely a breath. Not the maid. She hadn't opened this drawer in years. Not the neighbors. No one ever came into her room. Not the children, they lived far away in their busy cities. Then her eyes slowly lifted toward the hallway. Toward the end of it. Toward the room no one entered. The thought tightened around her like an invisible hand. She tried to stand, but her knees felt heavy. The missing letter wasn't just paper. It was the only written memory of the night she never spoke about. The night her life changed in a way no one would ever understand. And now, someone else had it. Someone new. Someone had opened her drawer, reached inside, and taken the one letter that held the truth of what happened all those years ago at the old house by the river. Her breaths turned shallow. Her mind raced. And sound. Soft tap. Something sliding under her front door. She froze. Slowly, carefully, she walked toward the living room. Each step felt like stepping deeper into a past she had zipped shut long ago. A single folded paper lay on the floor. Her hands shook as she picked it up. On the front, in an unfamiliar but firm handwriting, were 5 words. "You forgot this, Eleanor." Her heart stopped. The missing letter was back. But whoever returned it knew exactly what it meant. There are moments in life when the past doesn't knock. It simply walks in, sits at your kitchen table, and waits for you to notice. That morning, as Mrs. Eleanor stood holding the returned letter, she felt that same quiet intrusion. The house didn't feel empty anymore. Felt watched. Not in a frightening way. No, it was something subtler, like a memory breathing just behind her shoulder. She took the letter to her armchair, the old one by the window where she often pretended to read but mostly just stared at the world passing by. Her fingers hovered over the seal. She could open it. She could finally read the words she had avoided for 15 years. But she didn't. Not yet. Instead, her mind drifted, slowly, painfully, back to that night. The night at the river house. She could almost smell the damp evening air again. Hear the creaking wooden boards beneath her steps. Feel the mix of hope and fear that had wrapped around her like a thin shawl. She had gone there to meet someone. Someone who shouldn't have mattered but somehow mattered more than anyone ever had. But the shadows of that night had grown teeth, and whatever happened there had followed her for years. She drew in a shaky breath. "No more running," she whispered. Just then the doorbell rang. Simple sound. But in the stillness of her home, it sliced through the silence like a blade. She hesitated. Visitors were rare. Unexpected ones. Almost impossible. She made her way to the door, each old floorboard creaking like it was warning her. When she opened it, the gray morning light spilled inside, and with it, the figure of a man she didn't recognize. At least, she thought she didn't. He was tall with kind eyes, though something about him felt deeply unsettled, like he carried stories he had never told anyone. His coat was worn, his shoes muddy. He stood there with the hesitation of someone who knew he shouldn't be there, but came anyway. "Mrs. Eleanor?" he asked softly. Her stomach tightened. "Yes." He removed his cap, holding it in front of him like a schoolboy about to confess something. I'm sorry to come unannounced. I know this is unexpected. But I think," he swallowed, "I think you knew my father." Her heart dropped. There it was, shadow taking shape. She stepped back, gripping the frame of the door for support. Who was your father?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Some things you feel before you hear them." The man took a deep breath. "His name was Samuel." The name crashed into her like a wave. Samuel, the man from the river house. Samuel, whose memory was wrapped in these missing letters. Samuel, whose absence had carved a hollow inside her that never truly healed. But Samuel was gone. He had been gone for years. And now his son stood in her doorway, holding more truth in his eyes than she was ready to face. "I think," the young man continued gently, "you're the only one who can tell me what really happened to him." Eleanor felt the room tilt. The past wasn't just knocking now. It was here, standing on her doorstep, waiting for answers she hadn't said aloud in 15 long years. And for the first time she realized, the shadows from her past weren't done with her yet. The young man's presence lingered in the room like a quiet storm. Not loud, not violent, but heavy, as if he carried years of unspoken truths in the folds of his coat. Eleanor placed a trembling hand on the arm of her chair, steadying herself. "Sit, dear," she whispered, though her voice sounded foreign to her own ears. He sat across from her, the afternoon light pooling gently on his face. He looked so much like Samuel, same earnest eyes, same gentle posture. A resemblance soft enough to ache and sharp enough to cut. For a moment neither spoke. Then he said, "I found your name in his things. On letters he never sent." Letters. Her breath caught. So he had kept them. All those words she forced herself not to write, all those apologies she swallowed, all the silence she chose out of fear. He had done the same. Two people trapped by the same mirror, facing opposite ends of regret. "What do you want to know?" she finally asked. He ran a hand through his hair, struggling. "I want to know who he really was in those last months." He changed, grew distant, spent nights away. My mother said there was someone he could never forget. Someone who held a part of him she could never reach. Eleanor closed her eyes. She wasn't sure if she wanted to cry or apologize to the world. "I didn't take him from your mother," she said softly. "But yes, I was part of his life." And there, in that soft confession, the past unfurled. She told him about the river house, how she and Samuel met long before he had a family, in a time when both felt unseen by the world. They were just two lonely souls who found each other by accident, and held on longer than they should have. She told him of their final night, the night the rain refused to stop. Samuel had asked her to meet him, said he had something urgent to share. But when she arrived, he wasn't there. Only a note pinned to the door, soaked and barely readable. "I remembered only one sentence clearly," she whispered. "Forgive me for the silence." The young man listened, his eyes glistening with the ache of truths that were too old to blame and too fresh to ignore. "What happened to him after that?" she asked. He shook his head. "We don't know. He left the next day. Told my mother he needed to close old doors. A week later, he died in an accident." Eleanor's breath shattered. All this time, she thought he had simply chosen a different life. Chosen silence. Chosen distance. But he had been trying to return. Trying to explain. Trying to finish the unfinished chapter they kept tucked away from the world. The young man reached into his coat and pulled out a small, weathered envelope. "This was the last letter he wrote," he said, placing it gently in her hands. "He never sent it. I think it was meant for you." Her fingers shook as she looked at Samuel's handwriting, older now but unmistakably his. The room felt still. The world felt paused. And as she held the letter close, Eleanor understood. The truth wasn't just painful. It was unfinished. And only one chapter remained between her and the closure she had been running from for 15 years. There are letters that close a chapter. And there are letters that open a door you didn't know was still locked. As Eleanor held Samuel's final envelope, her fingers trembled the way old leaves tremble in late autumn. Fragile, honest, unashamed. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she let it sit on her lap, letting its weight tell its own story. The young man, Samuel's son, waited quietly across from her. No rush, no pressure. Only a shared stillness, like they both understood something sacred was happening in that small living room. Finally, with a slow exhale, she opened the letter. Samuel's handwriting, softer now, almost tired, stretched across the page. She read silently at first. Then slowly, her lips moved with the words. "My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then the truth has found its own way home." Her eyes blurred. She swallowed hard and kept reading. "I should have come sooner. I should have told you everything. But I feared I would reopen a wound in your life that you worked so hard to heal. I walked away that night not because I wanted distance, but because I thought leaving would protect you." The room felt suspended. No clock ticking, no breeze, no sound. "You were the one place I ever felt understood. The one person who saw me without judgment. I am sorry for every silence I gave you. I am sorry for the night at the river house. I never meant to disappear. I only meant to return with a truth I was brave enough to finally carry." Her hand pressed against her heart. 15 years of unanswered questions softened into trembling understanding. The letter continued. "Life took turns I was not ready for. I made choices I regret, and some I cherish quietly. But you, Eleanor, you were never a mistake. You were the memory I carried like a small light in my pocket. Something warm to hold on to in dark seasons." Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. At the bottom, one final line. "Forgive me. Not for loving you, but for leaving the words unsaid." When she finished, the letter rested on her lap like a sleeping bird. Samuel's son watched her gently. "I think," he said softly, "my father wanted peace for both of you." Eleanor nodded, unable to speak. He stood up, hesitated, then said, "If you'd like, I'd like to visit again. Not to ask questions. Just to know the part of him that lived in you." It was the first warmth that touched her heart in years. "Yes," she whispered. "I would like that very much." When he left, the house felt different. Not empty. Not haunted. Just quiet in a softer way. Eleanor walked to the hallway, toward the room she had avoided for 15 years. The room that held the box of memories, the broken letters, the unanswered past. Her hand rested on the doorknob. This time she did not turn away. She opened the door. Light fell inside, touching old dust, old sorrow, old dreams. And Eleanor felt something loosen inside her, like a knot untying after years of being pulled tight. She sat in the middle of the room, Samuel's letter against her chest. Not grieving, not aching, just remembering with peace. For the first time she understood. Some doors in life aren't meant to stay closed forever. Some stories don't end in tragedy. They end in truth. And truth, even when late, is still a kind of love.